So my first speaker for AV6, I think I'm right in saying he has spoken at every AV event. I think. And it's almost a case of an AV event wouldn't be complete without him, but he was away in the States when I was really sort of putting the final touches to the program. So I didn't get an opportunity to really speak to him until about 10 days ago. And Brian was actually flying back into the country after a very interesting experience in the US, where he almost managed to get himself completely strip searched, and rubber gloves and all, but that'll teach you. See, Brian took rather literally on the immigration form when you come to the US, and there's it asks you all the sort of questions like, are you a terrorist? Are you carrying drugs? So, and then underneath all the questions, it says, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask Homeland Security. So Brian walks up to Passport Control, Homeland Security, and they say, okay, can you put your fingers on the screen, Mr. Gerrish? And Brian's like, why do I have to do this? And that nearly got Brian into a whole world of trouble. So, and I think that was the point at which his wife almost filed for divorce. So just because it says, if you have any questions. But Brian has established himself, I think, as certainly the prime mover in terms of exposing this insidious organisation, Common Purpose. And that is really, I think, what a lot of people know Brian for, the work that he has done in exposing Common Purpose over a decade plus now. And it's still ongoing. And it's a credit to Brian that I think it was the Daily Mail, and what would it be, a couple of years ago now, literally plagiarised Brian and Mike. I mean, let's not forget that Brian's part of a very cohesive team, Brian Gerrish and Mike Robinson. And basically the Daily Mail plagiarised their work and plastered it over a couple of full-page spreads, which of course at least puts it out there, but of course the agenda of Common Purpose is so insidious that it's just straight over the heads of most people. But Julia Middleton, as we know, has the ear of whomever occupies number 10. So over the last, 3-4 years, of course, Brian and Mike have evolved UK Column into their almost daily news show. And we know that many of the people who watch UK Column News are actually within the establishment. I mean, that's the only reason I do Fracking Nightmare, to be honest, because the only people who watch it anymore are the establishment and the industry. Because everybody who's part of the anti-fracking community already knows everything I'm going to talk about. So it's very important that we actually let the establishment know, what it is that we know, and that we don't care that they know what we know, because basically, when you're telling the truth, you don't care. And so this medium that they've created, of course, is very, very significant. And of course, ATVOD, which is the Authority for TV and Video on Demand, which is effectively a private organisation that operates as a quango, and it's obviously set up to do exactly what it says on the box, which is control the alternative media. And it's pretty much just over a year ago that ATVOD wrote to UK Column and said, basically, you either register with us or we're going to effectively sue you and seek fines of up to £250,000. So full credit to Mike and Brian. They basically told ATVOD where to put their request. So they didn't register with ATVOD, but it meant that they've had to remove their programs from the UK Column YouTube channel on the basis that UK Column produces TV-like programs. TV-like programs. So this is a body that has a mandate from central government, but operates completely beyond authority. And that's what we're going to see through the weekend, that we're beginning to experience this beyond authority agenda from these types of organizations. But it's a full credit to Brian and Mike. It hasn't curtailed their enthusiasm in any way, shape or form. The UK column news is now absolutely essential viewing for an increasingly growing population. And of course, one advantage of them not being on YouTube is that there's no ready access to the numbers of people watching. But we know, just from touring around the country, that the number of people who watch UK column is increasing exponentially. So they're doing a very, very important work here. So Brian is going to share his insights over the recent election fraud and his prognosis of where this might be heading. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brian Gerrish.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to UK Column News, just after 1 o'clock. It is a bit of a worry when you hear that music because you go into sort of auto. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, brilliant. Thank you all for coming, and can I say a big thank you to Ian Crane, because I know all of these events take a huge amount of organisation, and credit where it's due. Let's just give Ian a round of applause for bringing this together. Now, Ian gave me a job, which I'd like to do now. It's pretty easy. I just want you just to move around a bit, just shuffle your bottoms a bit, loosen up the hips. Come on. It won't hurt for most of you. There's a few. All right? And then sit yourselves back down soundly, because my job was to get bottoms on seats, basically. So I just want to make sure there's proper contact. Right, so Ian, that's the first job done. Okay, well, this was the talk that emerged, and it's pretty incredible for us to watch what's been happening in the country. Beyond authority, election fraud, and the rush to communitarianism. I'm not going to get into a heavy debate about what communitarianism is. I've got a definition towards the end, but we'll understand it by the time we work through some of this. But what's been really strange for me over the last, I suppose, 3 months as this election has built up or not built up, it's almost watching everything we've been talking to starting to come to fruition. And it's always difficult with these talks. It's not what you've got to present, it's too much information, and you're trying to thin it down to give a picture. So I hope I've got it about right today. But this is basically our look, we'll say a UK column look at what's been happening politically, what's really been happening politically. So here he is, David Cameron. And as usual, we've chosen material mainly from the mainstream media because this is what the average person believes. And in this picture, of course, he's with a group of people, and he's talking about his policy. Does anybody know what the Tory election manifesto said? Great. Does anybody know what the Labour manifesto said? It's all right, I'm not going to check. I don't know either. And I mean, this was the election, wasn't it, that we saw no campaigning, and we didn't see really any information about these people's policies. But this was the sort of stuff that appeared in the press. And what was this man doing? Well, he was getting his policies across, except even the Daily Mail here was picking up the phony election, bogus rallies, photo stunts, vacuous sound bites, and what's it saying? The press banned. The press banned. Now, this one is particularly interesting because where did this little event take place? Well, it took place in a cowshed. So this was completely fraudulent. It was all orchestrated, pushed out there as if David Cameron is surrounded by loving members of the electorate, but in fact it was all done in a cowshed. It might have been a chicken farm previously, I don't know. But there we are. So it's all lies and deception. Now the next one is a really bad slide, because this is what I said I would talk about. I'm just going to read the first paragraph because it's the key thing. I never for a moment imagined that big money and big lies could so successfully scare, cajole, and diddle the electorate of this country. I grew up in a Britain both better educated and more honest than the one we have today. Perhaps that is why I could not see this possibility. I have not seen in my lifetime a campaign so dishonest, so crude, so based in fear, and so redolent of third world and banana republic politics. Now, as I've said, those aren't my words, but when I read them, I just thought, wow. So that's Peter Hitchens talking. And I agree with everything he said there, with one exception. He says that it was crude. The campaign was crude. And I don't think it was crude at all, because if we actually look at the whole picture, that was just the icing on the cake. What was done in order to get the Tories back into power was just the icing on the cake. It wasn't crude, it was very cold, cynical, calculated. So let's just have a look at some of the things that were talked about in the election, and then we'll try and get under the surface. Well, this for me was one of the worst things that I saw. I put in the "oh please" because it was just so disgusting that if you cared to sign up to the Labour Party, you got one of these bags, a Grace and Perry bag. Does that mean anything to anybody? Well, apparently it's important. I thought Tesco gave these away for free, but apparently you can. They charge, do they? Okay, quid. Well, anyway, it's pretty pathetic, desperate stuff, and that's the state of one of the mainstream parties. Well, then we get this sort of stuff in the paper, a lot in the lead up to the election about the fact the parties were very close. There was a lot of nasty politicking going on. There was backstabbing. One minute they were supporting Ed Miliband, the next minute they were undermining him. So we watched as basically there was a lot of confusion developed in people's minds. Who was the good guy? Who was the bad guy? It all got very blurry. And of course, the mainstream press did as much as they could to help this backstabber, Ed Miliband. And there's the mixture in with SNP. So I just had a look at a bit of the statistics. And this is one of the, I should have put the source for this. I think this is just from Wikipedia. So quite useful because what they've done is listed out all of the polls that were taking place. And if we just put a bit of information in here, here's the result. Up here, they're saying 37.8% for Tories, 31 for Labour, 8 for Lib Dem, 12.9 for UKIP. So over 4 million people vote for UKIP, and how many MPs did they get? One. And SNP, well, there was just over 1 million people voting for SNP, and they got 58, I think it was. So basically, you look at it and you say something's wrong here. But this was all the list, and the important thing was, in the whole lead up to the election, everything we were being told was that it was very, very close. They were even talking about how long it would take them to form a coalition. So everything we were given was all about this fact it was heading towards a coalition, and then wallop, what happens? Apparently a massive swing to the Tories. Now, a lot of people are saying this was achieved by fraud in the postal vote. And I can't give you evidence that that's true, but what I can say is it makes sense to me, because in Plymouth, for example, a lady who had a postal vote and her son had a postal vote got a phone call from the local Labour Party, and they wanted to know whether she'd used her postal vote. And she said, "I'm not talking to you because it's none of your business." They called her back. She rebutted them. They called her back again. So they called her about 4 times. And eventually she said to them, "Look, why are you calling me?" And a slightly embarrassed lady for the Labour Party said, "Well, we're calling you because we're beginning to here that people have not received their postal votes. So we're just trying to find out what's going on. So a little bit of a chat started, and eventually this Labour lady said, well, the other thing that we've been told is there's bags of votes which have disappeared into Royal Mail. Sorry. And this was an anecdotal story from Plymouth, but we've heard this from other parts of UK. At the moment you start looking at the postal votes, nobody's sure. And of course, Cameron was busy boasting about 7 million postal votes. So I'm not saying to you it's provable there was election fraud. Do I personally think there was? Yes. What was the scale of it? I don't know. But have we got a trustworthy system? I don't think so. So this is a good one because it's an article in The Independent with the BBC, ITV and Sky congratulating themselves because they said their exit poll got it right. And this is what they said the result was in this article. And I found this interesting because these totals didn't agree with what I then saw later. So even just going to research the election simply on the internet, you started to find strange things that people were reporting even different numbers of MPs. But they said they got it right, and they got it right because they went and interviewed people who had voted and got them to do another hidden ballot. So was this real or not, or was this just the BBC trying to make an excuse for the fact there'd been election fraud? I don't know. Well, here's the Telegraph, and of course this is the map of UK now. So we've got Scotland, one-party state, SNP, and if you think about that, one police force in Scotland, the judiciary are tied in with the political system, and you have one party. So I'm going to say to you, and we've got people north of the border saying it, Scotland now is a police state. It's got all of the attributes of a police state, and we know what happens when you challenge police state. So here's the Telegraph's final result, 331 for the Conservatives, 232 for Labour, 56 for SNP, 8 for Lib Dems, and just 1 for UKIP. So 4 million people didn't like what was going on, but of course if we analyse how many people voted, even more people just didn't bother to vote. And a wipeout is what we're being shown here. And this is the bit, was this real or was it fraudulent? Well, the celebrations went on. Apologies for this picture. The bit here says Obama congratulates his bro. Apparently Obama calls him bro, and he phoned him up to say, yo, bro, well done with the election results. So this is all pretty mature reporting, and I just love these faces, particularly this man. It's worship. It's absolute worship. Maybe this lady as well. But here they are, and, well, lovely people, and we're all happy because they're going to rule our lives. Is this real? Well, of course it's not. And what do we need to go to? Well, I pulled up this article from the UK column. At the time, Brown was in power, and we were accusing him of pawning Britain. But the key bit is that we really took a look at what was going on in politics. And we are saying that this bit here is pure theatre. It doesn't matter what you see with the politicians, what they're talking about on TV, what they're debating. They are absolutely not driving the country. They're simply the puppets for other people behind the scenes. And the caption there, destroying Britain's never been so easy. Just follow our instructions and learn how to push the Marxist agenda. Fabian, communitarian, I don't mind what we call it, we'll identify it. So this is where we say this is how it really works. It's this level, the establishment level, that controls all of this theatre. And I think that's becoming easier and easier to see. So how do these people work? Well, this is probably a key part of it. Backers, money, big business. We're now drawing in the corporate side. And what's important about that is if you look at a fascistic society, of course, big business was an intimate part of it. It worked with the government. So if we're looking at global corporations, we're looking at Serco or Capita or BT, all of these big companies, we can now see that they're directly linked in with our political system, and that, in my book, is moving towards fascism. So, well, let's have a look at the happy couple. They are nice, aren't they? I mean, they're just so slick and smooth. And, you know, Sam is always well-dressed, and she's a nice lady. At one point, I had the pleasure of working in a call centre in Plymouth. It was an interesting period. I did about 7 months there, and I learned a lot. If anybody wants to ask me afterwards what I learned, I'll tell you, but it was fascinating. But one night it was very quiet, and we were just chatting. The phone teams were just chatting. And there was a lady there who liked to take the mickey out of me. She called me Dangerous Brian because of my beliefs. And I said something about this lady, and she said, I used to work for Sam. I said, did you? Where was that? And she said, I used to work in her furniture shop, which is in Devon, fairly close to Ashburton. And she said it was quite good. I sold a Japanese lady a lot of bedroom furniture one year, and I got a big bonus. So I said, oh, what's it like working for Sam? And I'm not going to repeat on stage what she said to me, but basically she said she wasn't a very nice lady. And I thought that was interesting. But of course, the public image is this squeaky clean couple. They go to church on Sundays, and we should trust them. Well, when you dig a bit, it starts to become more and more obvious. So here's even the Daily Mirror digging into the Tories and talking about the amount of money that they get. So Cameron getting quick $500,000 in donations, 200,000 to Witney constituency, George Osborne, 330,000. And what's the other one down here? Boris Johnson. Well, we'll mention him a bit later, but Boris is getting more and more power. And if you're going to escalate in the power pyramid, you're going to need money to do it. Well, most days in the UK column, we're opening envelopes with £600,000 in. No, honestly, it's how we do it. There's a lot of people believe this. Probably we're getting it from the same people. Got a bit of feedback. Don't know what that is, but there we are. Okay, so even the Mirror starts to do a little bit of digging, but it was the mainstream press some time ago that reported this little happy couple, Anita and Pojo Zabludovitz. And it appeared in several papers. It was interesting, but it all disappeared. But I never forgot it, because basically this gentleman got going in a family that were arms dealers, international arms dealers. He's Finnish Israeli. He donated £15,000 to Cameron's leadership campaign. That was for leader of the Tory party. And they put at least 131,000 into the Conservative Party. I believe I'm correct in saying he's also involved with an organisation called BICOM, which is very pro-Israeli, and they've put about £800,000 into the Tory party. But it isn't just the fact that he's got a background with a company with arms dealing, it's the fact that his wife got involved in this. So she ran an art exhibition up in the Midlands which featured statues, and one of the statues was Christ with an erection. Now, we can smile at this, but if we carry on through this to see what the ideology is that's drifting into the country, it is very, very nasty. And I'm not going to get into a heavy discussion on beliefs, but my personal belief is that if you really start to analyse where these people are, they are certainly not loving, and they're certainly not Christian. And we'll just leave it at that for the moment. But those are the people who are behind our illustrious Conservative leader. But everywhere we look for the politicians, we're looking at this sort of stuff: self-interest, fraud and corruption. And what better man to choose than Mr. Rifkin? So he got bowled out for dodgy dealing with a Chinese company. I don't think it really existed. It was a sting operation, But nevertheless, we started to see senior politicians who were actually being caught in the greed rat trap. And what was special about this man? Well, he was very special because at the time he was sitting as chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee. So I'm going to say, as an ex-military person, this makes me very interesting that whilst the military are away at sea thinking they're doing a good job, these people are up to a pack of no good. And okay, that's just his position in this organization, but of course he has access to very to classified information. Security of the country's in his hands, and yet what is he prepared to do? Dirty deals with foreign companies. And I'm also just going to remind people here that, of course, David Cameron has said that his undying loyalty isn't to Britain, it's to Israel. He's publicly said that several times, so have many other politicians. So we've now got a leader who has said, well, my bond with Israel is unbreakable. Not my bonds with the British people, my bond with Israel is unbreakable. So people picked up on this. This is Tom Watson. He said, to discuss working for a bogus Chinese company is very odd indeed. So well done, Tom Watson. But what else have we got here? Cameron is also, of course, handing away our nuclear infrastructure. So one minute we're saying China's a dangerous country with very poor human rights, we're taking body parts out of prisoners, and the next minute David Cameron says, great, this is just the nation to come and take over what is our strategic infrastructure. So you control the power supplies in UK, you control your toast and morning cuppa. But that's what he was up to. And, well, let's just bring in Mr. Leon Britton, fine upstanding politician. Unfortunately, he just died at the right time, but he's a cousin of Malcolm Rifkin. We'll just leave that. So here he is, Mr. Rifkin, and he's also been involved with this organisation, the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. How many of you heard of that? Good, brilliant. So we've got a couple of people. I got interested in them because they produced this document. That's the front cover, and what's on the cover, common purpose, and they're discussing the future of Europe all sorts of ways. They're talking about society, they're talking about libel laws, they're talking about security, they're talking about border controls. So he was involved with this group of people. Here's some of the names: Serbian ambassador, Turkish Foreign Service, CIA. What was discussed? What did Mr. Rifkin discuss when he was meeting with these people? I've no idea, but I don't get a warm feeling from it. So a bit of dodgy business dealing on the side, but he's also going to be mixing with these people in a common purpose. And we asked what his common purpose was. Now, of course, he was sacked. So the establishment obviously didn't like what he was doing because they got rid of him. But we don't know exactly what was going on. Now, you've got a bit of a hornet's nest here, a snake's nest. I'm interested in snakes because I nearly stepped on two in America. It was quite an interesting experience, coming down a trail and suddenly, whoa. Luckily, not poisonous, but I didn't enjoy it. And I'll say this as a bit of black humour. The moment I saw it, I thought something's going on in UK. And that's the state I've got to. So how do you control a snake's nest? Well, basically, the best thing to do is to be able to utterly control people. And that's where you need the perversion and the blackmail. So what sort of people are running the country? Kind, moral, honest, trustworthy, and upstanding. Well, this is two of them. Now, we can all smile. Brooks Newmark sent a load of pictures to two ladies, and he thought he'd snap himself in the bathroom. And Chris Bryant was advertising on the internet for partners. This is Britain represented in the world. Ladies, should I be apologising to you, or is this quite good at this time of the morning? Okay, so Brooks Newmark the UK column was interested in because this is the man who, when he's not parading around in his birthday suit, was going over and having meetings with General Idris, and he was busy saying to him, we will have bombs raining down on Syria and Assad. He promised General Idris in a meeting with him on the Turkish border that Britain would be raining bombs and missiles down on Syria. And we challenged him about his so-called evidence in the paper that chemical weapons had been used in Syria. I spoke to him on the phone. I asked him what the evidence was. He could not produce a scrap of evidence. Everything he referred to was possible, maybe, might. It didn't matter whether it was British reports, American reports, or the UN. And then he got pretty stroppy with me, and then he put the phone down. He never produced the evidence which was printed, which accused Assad of using chemical weapons. But this is what he gets up to in his private time, and of course he fell from grace. This man I'm not even going to talk about because I just think he's yeah. But we chose these people, and is it any wonder we got a few problems? Well, it's not only at that level, because this was a mainstream article, and here we are. Cameron's joke to Sam before meeting Berlusconi, I'll leave the jacuzzi before the whores arrive. But of course, you've got to note the poppy, because the image for the public is I'm an upstanding man and I'm doing good for the country. This is just theatre. It's just a puppet show, and we've got to get our attention to where the real power is. Here's the real power, because we're back on the subject of abuse of children. And let's remember Harriet Harman, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, she lobbied for the rules on pornographic pictures of children to be relaxed. It should be, the onus should be on parents to prove that their children were harmed by the fact that they had photographs taken of them. This is perverse. This is unbelievably dangerous stuff, and yet she parades around Westminster representing us. And this is how it's done, isn't it? It's not debate in the open chamber in Westminster. It's little dirty backroom deals between these people. And of course, Brown hasn't gone away. What's been his main task since he's left Westminster? Children. So he's into education with the United Nations. Everywhere you track these politicians, you are coming up with organisations dealing with children, charities, UN stuff, education stuff, EU stuff. It's all about children. And when you follow through the children route, the first thing you discover is vast sums of money. So you take one charity in UK, Action for Children, a turnover of 198 million based on fostering and adoption of children. This is big business, and there's a reason for it. Well, here he is, Jack Straw, and let's remember that he became Home Secretary and then Foreign Secretary. So in his day, he was quite a powerful guy, and this is what he got up to. As of April, because of a change in legislation being introduced by Jack Straw, the media will no longer be able to identify those involved in cases such as the Webster, a child case. It will also be illegal for any children currently in care to speak out, even if they feel they're being maltreated. Okay? Why would you do that? There is only one reason, isn't there? That you are covering up the abuse of children. And the reason they're covering up the abuse of children is because that is the ultimate blackmail which controls all of these puppets who are doing the bidding of the people with the money. So let's bring in this. This was a Mail article about a Down syndrome lady. Her mum went out, and the next minute a policeman said, oh, this girl had been left out in the cold, and it got pretty nasty pretty quickly. But the reality was that this policeman, Detective Sergeant Colin Hayler, had actually lied. Well, are we surprised? Talk to Ian Puddick. What will he tell you? The police lied and lied and lied. Nottingham, the police lie Devon and Cornwall, the police lied. Not all of them, but the official line is often a lie. Well, not only did the police lie, that lie was supported by social services. And this is where the danger is, because we're now seeing all of these public bodies linking together. The police are working with social services, they're working with education, they're working with the local authority. They're sharing offices. But compare this case to Holly Gregg, because there was no mainstream press or media, no reports. BBC was pulled off the case, and basically there was a complete shutdown in the courts. And I'm going to say gently, if I sound a little bit passionate on this subject, I am, because to deal with these people in power, they need to be exposed for what they are, and that is where the children takes us. You understand what's happening with the children, the scale of the abuse and what they're doing to the children, and the lid comes off, which is why they're all working so hard to cover it up. So a couple of people said to me last night, well, of course, a hoax. It was not a hoax. How many people in this room have actually sat down with Anne and Holly Gregg? Okay, is that three of us? So I'm going to say very gently, we're supposed to be a truth movement. Isn't it a good place to start when you're looking at what the truth is, to speak to the actual people who say that they're being victimized? There's the Hampstead case. How many of you know about the Hampstead case? Little boy, yeah, a lot of people. Little boy and little girl talk on tape. There are people saying it's nonsense, it's a hoax, it's an MI5 operation. How many people in this room have actually met the Hampstead mother and her partner? How long did you spend with them, Ray?
4 hours.
Okay, I spent 6 hours with them, and I've spoken to the boy. And Ray has said, and I'll call him up on screen, that it is real. It is absolutely real. And if you follow through what has happened, those children have been utterly crushed to stop them telling the truth about what was done to them. And that crushing took collaboration between the police, social services, the Home Secretary, local politicians. This isn't a game, this is absolutely real. While we're here having quite a nice morning, I hope, Melanie Shaw, whose only crime was to report her abuse and the abuse of about 150 other children in Nottingham, is in prison. So what has Theresa May done? She has put an abuse victim in prison to shut her up. It is obvious what's going on. And I'm going to say, please, amongst the truth movement, if you call yourself truthers, get in on the ground and start to get the facts at source. And this is one of the things that I think UK Column has got right from the beginning. Some stories we haven't touched because we can't get near it. We can comment, but you've got to be careful. But the stories we've really gone for, we know where the truth is. So here's the Evening Standard. It's talking about a woman trafficking children. And why we're interested in that is because the Hampstead children were calmly talking on video about babies being brought in from abroad. So here was a real case. The police never investigated any of the people that the children named. None of them. And that is exactly what Grampian police did in the Holly Gregg case. They simply failed to investigate it and then said there's no crime. So here's, sorry Ray, it's not a brilliant one of you, but here's Ray who's in the room, so you can speak to him. And he's saying, I know from my experience of a policeman of 20 years as a former detective sergeant that she, the mother, was speaking 110% the truth. Why is this issue so important? We have a corrupt, criminal, paedophilic government. They're either doing the abuse of the children or they're protecting the people who are abusing the children. And this is the real state of the country. So let's bring in Lord Janner. Got to be careful because everything is alleged. But I have a little booklet that was produced many years ago, sold for £1, talking about the accusations against this man. And what's happening at the moment? Well, he's being defended by Alison Saunders, the head of CPS. He's made 623 votes in House of Lords, but apparently he's not in a mental state to answer charges about abuse. So here she is, Alison Saunders, the same lady who was actually imprisoned Melanie Shaw. Well, why would you do that? Why would you cover up and protect paedophiles? Because they're, choose my words very carefully, within the political establishment, they're at it, and they've been at it for years. Well, here she is, Theresa May, the woman who successfully closed down any attempt to get a full public inquiry into the children. She's responsible for everything to do with law and order. One of the most dangerous politicians in UK, and this is what she said to Andrew Marr. How was it that the very institutions of the state that should be protecting the children were not doing so? What a liar. She is the state that was not protecting the children. But these people are so arrogant, they just tell the lie in front of you. And this is where you get a clue for the fact these people are not like us. She doesn't feel guilt. She can't do. She doesn't feel embarrassed. But we've put these people in charge. And this woman at the moment has got a whole operation to do with the police and the security services and MAPPA, which puts the Stasi to shame. So Robert Greene imprisoned twice, not for abusing children, but trying to expose what was going on. And now he's gagged worldwide. Robert Greene cannot speak about the Holly Gregg case anywhere in the world. If he does, he'll be lifted and deported back to Scotland, which we now know is a total police state. Why are they so worried about Robert? Because you follow the child abuse through, it takes you. Salmon lost or deliberately destroyed documents to cover up the Holly Gregg abuse case. If the lid comes off now, then SMP goes down. That's why they're so frightened. And what did they do with Melanie Shaw? She's banged up in a profit-making prison. It's horrific. This is Britain. So all of this David Cameron coming into number 10 and waving, puppet show, don't take any notice. Well, can I prove it? How many of you have seen this video? I'm not going to run it. It's on YouTube. So just put in Tim Fortescue, Tory whip. And in this clip, which was the BBC, he says this. He said, politicians have come to us with their problems, the whips, come to the whips with their problems. It might be anything, it might be money, it could be small boys. He says this on video. And he's asked why. Why would you do that? And he said, well, because when we'd helped them, they would do as we asked them. That's blackmail, isn't it? So here we've got on BBC film footage, a Tory admitting that the Conservative Party covered up paedophilia, and then it said we covered it up because then we could blackmail them. Perverse political will. Let's take the icing off the cake. Lovely photograph, and we just had to caption this one. You can just imagine her, mummy, please don't let this man touch me. But of course, what he's thinking is this little girl is profit. Maybe she's going to be picked up by social services and just used and trafficked for profit, or she's going to be worked to death, because that's what they're doing with us. But there he is in the nice suit in the school, making out he's an upstanding Christian. This man is rotten. And the whole of the political regime is rotten. And the rot covers many layers. And here's good old Common Purpose. And we spent ages trying to expose this organisation. A lot of people now really begin to understand what it's about. I know David Noakes is here somewhere. I don't know whether he's in the room. I can't see him. He's at the back in the far corner. And because it's right that credit where it's due. David was one of the early people with me who produced some pretty blunt handouts which talked about what common purpose was really about. And we started to get some progress. But it all came really to a head because we discovered that here was Francis Maude, Minister for Transparency in the Tory company, working directly with common purpose. And here's Julia Middleton, Chief Executive. And okay, I'm playing games a bit, but what do you get in those eyes? I don't get compassion. Well, I see either they're dead or there's something very devious in these people. But who is this woman? She just comes out of nowhere, the industrial society demos, and she's sending emails to Francis Maude saying, love Julia. Well, these people were up to no good, and we wrote several articles talking about what they were up to. And then, of course, it all hit the headlines because, as Ian's told you earlier on, what happened was that the Daily Mail in particular picked up the work we'd done, and they started to work out that this attempt to control the press was all being driven by common purpose. This was the big wheel, Sir David Bell, and here she is waxing lyrical on all sorts of subjects. Got to watch the time a bit. This is a brilliant book. This is the book, Julia's book, Beyond Authority. You can get it for peanuts second-hand, recommend you get it. You can read how to set up useful idiots. To change Britain, we need a fifth column. And if you get in the way, she's very nice, because anybody who gets in the way of what they're doing, they're going to run over them, undermine them, discredit them. It's charity, supported by the government. It's trained hundreds of thousands of people all the way through society, including school children. It didn't do any SRB checks when it put their people into schools. So in Liverpool, a particularly vile man called Matthew Byrne, who was not only a paedophile, but he was busy abusing prostitutes, he was the man who selected who would be selected by common purpose. I normally put up a picture of him with David Cameron. This woman says in this book, in 2007, the government was building a coalition. How did she know? She knew because the real government is nothing to do with the elections. It's to do with the common purpose behind the scenes. Here she is talking at TED, and her subject now is cultural intelligence. And this one, we're going to get rid of the nation state. Just have a look at it for yourself. It's right in front of your eyes. Eric Pickles said no local authority should deal with common purpose. It's a waste of money. While he said that, David Cameron was in India promoting common purpose. These people are duplicitous liars, but they're selecting the future leaders. And here's the sort of thing they want to do. Sorry, where is it? So this was an article done by researchers of the UK column. It was a fantastic article. Inside the NHS were common purpose trained people saying we need to completely transform the NHS. We need future leaders. We need, their words, 1 million change agents. Nothing about healing sick people. Nothing about caring for people. We need 1 million change agents to change the NHS. And this is what this rolling agenda is that seems detached from the political parties. What you've actually got is a movement under the surface to destroy everything. And they're arrogant. They're so arrogant that they tell us if we just take notice. So here he was. Many of you have seen this before because I can't stop using it. It's so brilliant. Tony Blair says he's got a vision of a new Britain. Central to this is the creation of a new class, there we are, the future leaders, a new elite placed in positions of authority, propagate the spirit, the new spirit of the age, and spread the third way across Britain. And if you go into that more, it says we're not going to elect them, they're going to be appointed. Spirit of the new age, right? My book, that man's giving you a hint of the sort of spiritual ideology he's got, and it doesn't match mine. I think these are very dark, dangerous people. I talked about a political cake being made. So we've got all the ingredients. We've got fraud, corruption, perversion, blackmail, the paedophilia, and then they're doing something. They're getting it all to work with behavioural change. Well, can we prove it? Well, absolutely, because here's Francis Maud running the government's behavioural insights team. And the technology's been so successful that they've sold it to the US and Australia. And what do they say? We can change people's views, values, and perceptions, and they will not know that has happened. That's in government documents which we've published. This is sophisticated stuff. And it was only the UK column that produced this wiring diagram. A little bit out of date because this is Gus O'Donnell and Jeff Mulgan heading up the civil service with Cameron, Maud, and Julia Middleton. But what we're saying is these are the key people who were manipulating public minds. And the first place the behavioural control was unleashed on were the government departments. DEFRA actually was the first one they went for, and they spent 34 million reframing the minds of the people working in the civil service in DEFRA. But this was interesting because we discovered they've been using this guy, a Frenchman, Olivier Willier. He's a mind control expert, and he'd had meetings with the Cabinet Office, and he was also part of French President, pardon? Sarkozy, Dozy Sarkozy, okay, part of his inner circle. So he's a French mind control expert. And then, of course, this was the government's behavioural insights team where they're pushing it through the civil service. And where's it ultimately heading? Well, this guy stood down, actually, but this is all Cameron's big society. You never hear about big society anymore. It's as though it disappeared. That's because it's under the surface. And what's the propaganda? Well, there's all sorts of that. I picked the Express in a couple of the news reports we did. Baseless article. This was just unbelievable. It said that ISIS had a gay wing. Okay, homosexuality is rife amongst the terrorists. It's a great article. You should read it. Let's have a look. Well, the first thing is it's not our information. It's come from the Times. It's good, isn't it? And it was uncovered by counter-terrorism experts. And it showed the men have stronger feelings than what an expert dubbed heterosexual bonding. Some experts say the taboo surrounding homosexuality in Western countries is too much, so the Muslims are rushing off to join ISIS. But if they did join ISIS and they were caught being gay, they were being murdered. So it's difficult, this one, but let's follow it through. Terrorists, experts, all expert. This is all expert article. When we asked the Express who the experts were, well, they're people connected with ISIS. Oh, really? That's an interesting statement. Well, no, they are security services. But we can't tell you anything about them because they're security services. But we know who they are. It was laughable. And then the online editor of the Express said, Brian, if you really want to discuss this, I suggest we have a pint. I said, I don't think I'll bother. But they're running away from Britain to join ISIS, but if they get caught, they're put to death. Yeah, okay, we believe all this. And let's have a look at this. This was the Mail saying that MI5 was recruiting more people to stop, presumably these people running away to join ISIS where they will be put to death. So MI5's now got another whole, what do they call it, cohort of people being paid $41,000 a year to stop people going to fight for ISIS. This is a good one. The Express saying this document, How to Survive in the West, which was a terrorist document released on the internet, when we researched where it had come from, which is this little organization, it's Washington, CIA, Israel. I mean, it's a complete and utter joke. Here's the gay story again. Well, what was the real agenda? It was David Cameron wanting to clamp down on free speech. Ramp up the fear, bizarre reports in the press, and on the back of the fact we've got to be fearful of being murdered in our beds by terrorists, we can now clamp down on radicalisation. And of course, David Cameron is saying you can be a non-violent terrorist. Welcome to the club. So where do you go for propaganda? You need to go to the BBC. We just love this because we're seeing more and more reports now with people really questioning the BBC. So Breitbart here said it's a sinister organisation and should be abolished. The Daily Telegraph said the BBC's outdated and it needed to demonstrate its relevance. So notice the way the mainstream press deals with it. But Breitbart said the BBC had played a key role in the transformation of Britain from a thriving, prosperous, basically happy nation into where we are now. So we liked these guys. Daily Telegraph, of course, pushing out the nonsense. But we had published this article some time ago. If you haven't read it, I'm going to encourage you to read it. It's on the website. It's talking about the BBC's action declared in their own documents, their own statements, that they have been going into foreign countries and helping to destabilize the governments. Right? I'm not guessing, I'm not making it up, it's no conspiracy. Read the article, refers you to what the BBC tells you about how they've been getting into destabilized countries. How do they know how to do it? I'm going to suggest because the BBC's been doing it here. So they know how it works. And of course, when they went into Kazakhstan, sounds unbelievable. Do you know what program they took to Kazakhstan? Crossroads. They developed a Kazakhstani, if that's the right word, version of Crossroads. And then what did they put in the storyline for Crossroads? Banks. Credit cards, diversity, women's rights, democracy, all drifted through into these people's minds through a very devious soap opera. Sounds incredible. It was all true. It's all documented. Marshall Plan of the Mind. That was the program, the Marshall Plan of the Mind. It sounds creepy. I think it is. So where's all this taking us? This was a definition of communitarianism from the Socialist Alliance program. What's it got to say? All-encompassing agitational work with our ultimate aim of communitarian or communist system. I'm not going to dwell on this. What's my feeling on communitarianism? It's a blend of communism and fascism. But the way you implement your society is you change society from the inside. And that's why you keep seeing this word transformation being used. We're going to transform the NHS, we're going to transform this. This is communitarian policy. And how have they done it? This is a very old slide of mine. Many people think this is still the body of people running the country, but a big cuckoo has appeared. And it's been driven by all of these sorts of people, the Young Foundation, the Tavistock Institute, Joseph Rowntree, the Fabian Society. There are hundreds of them. Where are they all funded from? Donations. Where do the donations come from? The bankers who are controlling the rest of the show. What did they do? They created the cuckoo's nest in our society, which was the third sector. And this is the sort of number of organisers that David Cameron's got going under big society. And so all of a sudden, things that should work are all being influenced not by these people who are elected, but all of these unelected think tanks. And this is the cuckoo's nest, Tony Blair's third sector, third way. And then put a bit of mind control over the top of it, and then get it properly named. And this is what is destroying the country. But nobody in the mainstream press is talking about it. Can we prove a bit? Well, here's the agitator, Saul Alinsky. And President Obama was a big student of his in Chicago. And what did Alinsky believe? There was no right or wrong in politics. It was just the end that mattered. You could get there how you liked. Bit of paedophilia, blackmail a few people, no problem. And here's the proof. This all got taken down from the websites. This was David Miliband saying he was going to follow Barack's lead with Alinsky. The philosophy of political action theorized. So this is all taken off Labour Party material. And here it is in the Conservatives. So there's no left or right in the present politics. It's a lib-lab con. And what's working underneath is the bit we need to pay attention to. And if you're building a dictatorship, you need all the proper parts, don't you? So you need a police state. You've got that in Scotland. What's happening to the police in England at the moment? It's being regionalised. They're collaborating. So we've got Devon and Cornwall police now starting to work with Dorset or Somerset police. And what you're going to find is the police are going to be regionalised. So instead of 43 police districts, there's going to be 7 of them.
Already got the National Crime Squad.
Okay.
Which used to be regional.
Yeah. And the other thing is we're now seeing the police are taking offices inside local authorities. Anybody got that in their city? It's happening in Nottingham, starting to happen in Plymouth. So you think there's separation between the bent councillors and the police? No, they're sharing offices. And here's Ken Clarke. Now, of course, he's a Nottingham MP. Isn't that interesting? I find it interesting. Big man in Nottingham. Melanie Shaw in prison in Peterborough. What's her knowledge? What was going on in Nottingham? And this is where we get to. I had a chat just before we started this morning with a couple of people because I'm now getting visits from mainstream journalists. And the last visit I had from 2 of them, we discussed some stories. I gave them something to run with. 5 weeks later, I get a phone call from the man and said, "Good story, Brian, I've been warned off by the police." But while the journalists were with us, Mike was there as well. We had a nice cup of coffee and a chat. And one of the journalists said to me, "Brian, you've taken a lot of flack. What do you think's happening in the country?" And I said, "We're rapidly approaching a dictatorship. And you know what happens to journalists in a dictatorship." And I watched the faces to see if they smirked or laughed, but they didn't. And he then said to me, "It's interesting because I've got a couple of journalist friends who started to follow stories, and the next thing was they had police on their doorsteps muttering about harassment." So the mainstream press are waking up, and they should do, because the state's now starting to go for them. And here's what's going on in the background. Dear old Willie. Yeah, has he disappeared from politics? Well, no, because what's he up to? He's deciding the future of the UK, devolution committee. Did anybody here vote for devolution? No, you're irrelevant. We're irreverent to these people. This is how dangerous the politics gone until we topple these people and replace them with the right ones. So there he is, Wicked Willie, as Mike Robinson likes to call him, and he's busy deciding our future. And so's David Cameron. And these are some of his words. I stole two of Mike's slides here. It's absolutely right that a new and fair settlement for Scotland should be accompanied by a new and fair settlement that applies to all parts of our United Kingdom. What settlement's he talking about? I don't know, but I think I have an idea. It's devolution. And here he goes on. It's also important that we have wider civic engagement. That's the big society. That's communitarianism in our United Kingdom. He says this word again and again and again. He doesn't mean our, he means the establishment. And they're going to empower the cities. How are they going to do that? They're going to give them mayors. Right? Boris Johnson, Mayor of London, big political figure, controls housing, controls transport, controls the police. Each city is going to get a godfather. Osborne's busy talking about it. And look at the hypocrisy. In this statement, one nation, one united kingdom, how are we going to achieve a united kingdom? We're going to use devolution to reshape the future. And what's the shape of the future going to be is big society. I put this one up for all the Illuminati fans. Why? Just see whether you're still awake, really. It's the little red dress. Yeah, the position of power, the red dress comes out. So here's Cameron up in Scotland. The debate's already started about more powers to devolve to Scotland. Scotland's going to get rid of the nuclear deterrent. Why is that? Because we are going to be absorbed into a European army unless we do something about it. He's promised a new devolution bill for Scotland in the Queen's speech coming up. Not debated in Parliament, I don't think, but he's just going to do it. So this is it. What can we do? We're always asked that. I've tried to come up with a way of explaining what's going on, and some time ago it was the fishing net, because the poor old fish swims around and they just don't see the net, and even if they see the net, they don't recognize that it encircles them. And my point is that unless we actually appreciate how this political system is attacking us, how do we decide what to do to stop it? So my analogy of the big society communitarian system is it's like a big fishing net, and we are trapped inside, and of course what happens to the fish? Killed and eaten. And it's not one or two, because if you get a really big fishing net, back in the, when we've got to go back to, I think back to the very early 80s or late 70s, there were 2 trawlers that netted 1,000 tons of herring in one net, 1,000 tons. And then you're going to say, how did they get the fish out? They pumped them out. Big pump sucks them out. So if we can see and understand the fishing net, we can escape it, we can destroy it, we can cut holes in it. But you can't fight what you don't understand. And if we fight political party system, complete waste of time. And this is the big bit. And this is why we're here. And I'm going to say again, well done to Ian, because we've got to get people working together. We are the tiny people, but the strength is in numbers. So this was a cartoon we modified, but you get the point of it. If each of us is doing something every day, and we're recruiting somebody else to help as well, we can actually turn this thing around. Don't know what it said here. Well, this is a key one. We get a lot of phone calls in the UK column from people saying, I'm getting quite spooked by what's going on. Well, I'm going to say join the club in a way, but if you want to get rid of the fear factor, just start doing things. It works a treat. And let's end on this bit, which is, does anybody know what this is? Well, it's dandelion. Yeah, well done for that. Any other significance? Well, I'll give it to you. If you look at a lot of the political documentation, or you see stuff in the public sector where there's transformation and change, you very often see that they've got a dandelion. And what they're showing is the seeds of their agenda drifting out, the seeds of change. And so I thought, well, why don't we capture their seeds of change? And we are doing the same thing in reverse. We're putting out the truth, which really takes apart what they're doing. And these are the sorts of areas that we should be covering. I hope you can read that with the colours. Common law, law and order, constitution, truth, love, happiness, compassion, kindness, courage, honesty, unity, opportunity, community, morality. And I'm putting God in there, because one of the key areas that this political ideology wants to destroy is our belief in a proper God and Creator. They are terrified that people start to really unleash true spiritual feeling, because they are absolutely dark. They are lying, cheating. They are murdering children. They're torturing them. They're abusing them. They're feeding off sick people in hospitals because they can make a profit, and they've got people like Melanie Shaw, a victim in prison. Their whole psychology is very dark, and if you get into what the real solution is, we've absolutely got to get ourselves out of this stuff. And believing that there is something greater than us is a very important part of it. I'm going to stop. Thanks very much for listening. Can we deal with it by being these little seeds? Yeah, we can. Thanks very much.
Music for the people, and the people got the power.